Hey, the 2022 F1 season is already underway in Bahrain, and I thought I'll make a short video just on why the Bahrain track is such a challenge for the current generation of F1 cars. So here's a video of Nico Hulkenberg in the Aston Martin locking up many times. And I expect that there will be a lot more lockups this year than in years past in F1. And yeah, there's a very good reason for that. So let's get into it. Um, it's important to note that there is this not often talked about suspension mode called warp. So I think heave, moving up and down, pitch, front to rear, roll, left to right. That is all quite well known by most people. What is maybe less talked about is this warp mode, where the ground beneath the vehicle is not flat. So as can see in this picture here with this this off-roader with the axles completely articulating in opposite directions. So that's what is called warp mode, and typically with a traditional traditional suspension springs, anti-roll bars, if you want to make the vehicle stiffer in roll and heave and pitch, which you typically want for an F1 car due to the need to keep the aero platform as stable as possible, you inevitably make the warp mode very stiff as well. So like in the most extreme case, imagine just having no suspension. It'll be super stiff in heave, pitch, and roll. You'd only have the stiffness of the tires, which the compliance of the tires, which will be giving slightly from the forces acting on on the tires. But otherwise, like if there was no suspension, it'll be very, very stiff. But then at the same time, you can imagine if there was even a small bump in the road, then you're suddenly on 2 or 3 wheels instead of 4, and as you can imagine, that the tire load distribution between the 4 tires very quickly becomes very uneven. And but from a tire performance point of view, you want to keep a very even load distribution between all 4 tires, because if you have one tire in the air, it's very easy to lock it there. It has no grip. But of course, even before getting to a single tire completely in the air, if you just reduce the vertical load on it significantly, it becomes obviously much easier to lock it. And this is where the simultaneous banning of interlinked hydraulic suspensions and the move to ground effect aero has made it such a challenge to set the cars up. But I think it'll be a good thing in the sense that it'll clearly lead to a lot more driver mistakes, which is good, because like if F1 is supposed to be a sport, then what you really want to see is which driver is the best, which involves not making mistakes and properly managing the weight distribution in their vehicle and manipulating the weight transfer and so on. So this is where like the previous generation of F1 cars made things much easier for the driver, because they had this front rear interlinked suspension, and what I show on screen is probably even a very it is probably not even the most complicated version. It's possible to also link them in a different manner. So what I've shown on screen is only providing stiffness in roll, not in pitch. But the main thing to note here is that if the front is rolling in one direction, so like we're talking about the warp mode, where so the front is trying to roll in one direction, and the rear is trying to roll in an opposite direction, then the fluid flow will kind of front and rear compensate each other, and it'll be very soft in warp. So it can be very stiff in roll, but very soft in warp. And this is a crucial point because it means that by having such interlink suspension, it's possible to set the car up to be very, very stiff in roll, but still have great traction, both in acceleration and braking phases, by loading the tires very evenly. You can think of it as if the vehicle had you had a vehicle which is very stiff, but then you cut it in the middle, and it's like the two sides are able to swivel versus each other. You can kind of imagine it conceptually a bit like that. But they've so the interlinked hydraulic suspension, and yeah, these are acting on the dampers, by the way. But this type of suspension is banned for this year, which means that the teams have to revert to much more classic, like, mechanical suspension, which so the warp stiffness of the cars this year will be much higher than last year, even without the fact that the suspensions have to be much stiffer anyway for the ground effect aero. So it's like a double whammy. You have the ground effect aero, which requires stiffer setup in general to keep the ride height more even, but also on top of that, the teams have lost the interlink suspension, which improves the warp stiffness. And actually it's a triple whammy, because on top of that, you have the tire stiffness increasing significantly as well, due to the move to the 18-inch rims, which means that there's also much less give in the tire sidewall. So yeah, in total, it's I would expect the warp stiffness of the 2022 F1 cars to be massively stiffer than the 2021 generation of F1 cars, and therefore lose traction and lose and lock up much more easily, which means which is kind of also what we're seeing, like the drivers are having to deal with snap oversteer when they run over curbs, and we also see them having massive lockups, as we saw in that video. Also, I expect from a comfort point of view, it's also much worse for the drivers. So what I'm showing on the screen is so, like, on the left, that is the typical the PSD of body accelerations of a passenger vehicle, where so you see two peaks. One, the first one is natural frequency of the vehicle body in heave, and then the second peak is the natural frequency of the unsprung mass. Obviously, for a racing car, the first peak will be a bit higher due to the stiffness. So I think 2 Hz is pretty sporty, but it's still like passenger vehicle type of stiffness. So I'm guessing, racing cars will be getting probably closer to 4, maybe 5 Hertz. And I think especially this year with the even stiffer suspension, it'll be moving even higher compared to last year. But but this means that the drivers will be beaten up a lot more. So like if you see this curve on the right, the main thing the most important one to focus on is the vertical. So what is this curve showing? It is basically the human sensitivity to vibrations in different frequencies, and the crucial point is there's a high peak in the vertical accelerations, between 3 and 9 hertz, which is kind of which is the natural frequency of the human internal organs, depending on your age, how much food you've eaten, and all that. But it's typically around there, which means that so as you shift the natural frequency of the vehicle into that frequency range, it's going to have so the vehicles will be significantly more choppy, and it'll be very tiring and very uncomfortable for the drivers. So and this is with not even taking into account this whole porpoising issue. This is just purely from a ride frequency point of view. The vehicles will be much more tiring for the drivers this year. So for sure it's going to be place even more emphasis on driver fitness in general, because it's going to be physically very tiring to be shaken vertically with that much choppiness, if the drivers get tired from that and lose focus, then we'll see more mistakes, which are caused by this increased warp stiffness. Look, kind of wonder who's going to come out on top. One final thought. So McLaren did really well in the Barcelona test, but isn't doing so well in Bahrain for the moment. That could potentially be due to this warp stiffness thing, where if Barcelona is quite flat, whereas Bahrain is a lot more bumpy and also has more changes in the track surface camber, which means that if you can probably get away with worse warp stiffness in Barcelona than in Bahrain. So that could be a possible explanation for McLaren's change in competitiveness. Hope it'll be a good race. Hope it was interesting. Till the next one.